Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. We thank you for tuning in, joining our show. We are here in season two of this incredible opportunity for you to hear from two legal experts every single Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in. You can catch the replays on any of our channels and Destiny Designers TV network. So we appreciate you. Hey, Richard, welcome to the show. Welcome back, everyone. It's a historic day. I have on my pearls. It's all about the pearls and the chucks today. Everybody who is representing for the first African American, Asian, Caribbean. I mean, she has so many titles right now. HBCU grad. We are all excited to see history happen in this country with the election of now Vice President Kamala Harris. So we're excited about that. And of course, the real comeback story of the new president, number 46, is actually in the building. So thrilled and excited that we have this chance and opportunity to celebrate this historic day with all of you. But there's a lot to talk about, as usual, here at Speaking Legally. So I'll let my co-hosts go ahead and give their greetings for the day.
Well, let me just say hello, everyone. Welcome to another season and another show. And, we're going to talk about the political climate and the things that happen overnight. You'd be surprised as to what 24 hours can do for a person that is walking the plank. You start to think about all the damage that you could do as you exit the door. It's like, to me, this whole Trump experience is like renting to bad tenants, right? And having a bad relationship. And you're finally on the last day that they have their lease and they have to leave, right? So the day before you go and you do the inspection, and you're like, everything is nice, yo. You know how you do it, Ed? Yo, bro, everything is good. Dr. Grant, everything lovely. Like, you got little marks, nothing big. Everything is great. You decide that you're not going to escort them out. You're going to just like, yo, everything was good. I'm going to go home. I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow or Monday, I'll get to it and everything will be fine. You come back Monday and you got holes in the sheetrock. In this particular example, the way Trump has acted, the radiator's gone. Like he's like really going, right? The radiator's gone. Your faucet, the handles are gone. Crayon marks, scratch marks. I mean, just totally violated. Now, we know that's more synonymous with what the insurrectors, rioters, however you want to call them, what they did to the White House. We know that's more related to them. But what Trump did with his ability to pardon, give clemency, commutate sentences, do whatever, what was like stealing the radiator. When you thought everything was legit, you know what I'm talking about, Little Weezy. When you thought everything was legit, all of a sudden you walked out of the door. So I'm just going to say hi, hello. We're going to kick it off really hard like that. Ed, my abogado brother, hit it off.
Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Hola, buena tarde a todo el mundo hoy. I'm glad you're here with us today. As usual, I think you're going to find today's show quite interesting and fulfilling at the same time. You're absolutely right, Royce. What's happening here is just absolutely disgraceful. You got an outgoing president that doesn't even have the honor, the respect to attend the inauguration, and instead goes out to Andrews Air Force Base and has some sort of campaign rally where he's rambling on about his unaccomplishments and trying to give himself credit for the disaster that he has created, incited, and that has ensued. In fact, I watched a little bit of it, not much, because it's hard to watch and or listening to. I saw his frozen hair blowing in the wind. It just was amazing to watch. At the very least, VP Pence had the honor and dignity to sit in at the inauguration to show some semblance of respect and dignity, coming out of this outgoing administration.
Yeah, it was, Dr. Grant, it was painful. But what I will say is that he has stayed on point all day and all night. And that is to repeat his message no matter what. That's what he does best. He repeats his message. Whether you like it or not, he repeats it. And, you know, that's something that we need to take away. I call it the Kobe Bryant interview. Kobe scores 81. You can ask him about anything else. Well, how was the defense? I had 81. Were you I had 81. Were you thinking about ever missing? I had 81. And so this is what Trump does. He just repeats what he wants to repeat, and he says it different ways. So he said, and let's talk about this. What he said was that America's in really good hands. I wish him luck, because this is how he talks.
Luck.
You know, I left them with very good. I left them in a very good position, so it should only go high. And then he'll stop. It should only go high. I mean, it should go high. I mean, but it should go low. But it should go high because I left the stock market really, really high. And it's like he's saying, you only got to do, only thing you have to do is I did everything great. And all you have to do is just come in and just chill, and everything will be all right. You know, the vets, I've treated the vets, the best
ever.
The vets, the best ever. You know, they like me so much. They can go to a bank, they can cash their check with no problems. I mean, like, what are you saying? Like it's almost like he's saying, you know, we gentrified a horrific part of town, and now you can go there, you could drive. And he just repeats. I don't know where they're gonna go now, what's gonna happen to the vets now. But when I was, you know, I left them in very good shape. And, you know, it's not slick what he's doing. It's not even artful, but he's doing what he's doing. And you're right, Brother Russell, he does talk like a child, but sometimes you need to talk like a child to make sure everybody gets the message. And his base, they get that childlike speak. And then he says, I'll be back. You know what I mean? I'll be back.
It's ridiculous. It's too much. It's too much. Switching gears, because what it was for me today, first of all, forever First Lady Michelle Obama slayed the game. She's slaying the internet. Everybody's talking about her. And number 44, our very own President Barack Obama, and how awesome they just looked coming down, and just seeing so much of what happened today. President Joe Biden is showing who he is, starting with prayer, for real, not like fake holding a Bible. So, right. You know, really going in and being in prayer and seeking God to help govern in this very difficult time. He didn't mince his words with what he said in his speech. He called white supremacists out. You know, I think Ed was talking about that earlier. This is the first time that a sitting president has called a thing a thing. You know, we had the beautiful poet laureate, you know, the youngest. I mean, our sister slayed today, Amanda Gorman. Oh my goodness, I had to just repost her whole poem, which was phenomenal. And Lady Gaga, she always does the most, but she came with her bird, she sang. We had Garth Brooks sing, and then J-Lo.
Jenny from the block came from all
Jenny from the block. And she habla español. I was like, get it, girl. It's a new day. It's a new day in America. She was representing BX, doing her thing.
Yeah, I mean, what I found today was a certain level of authenticity in the face of so much fakeness the last 4 years. As you mentioned, President Biden goes to church before the inauguration. 4 years ago, you had evangelists and others in the religious lobby praising a president who was really not religious, who didn't even know how to hold a Bible, but yet people in that faith community were walking around with their Trump buttons, regardless of his behavior. So here you see the contrast. You also see the contrast in terms of, you know, the people of color introduced into the scene. You see the authenticity in the statements that are made. I mean, you see a guy entering the White House who's actually comes from a working class background, not some rich guy born with a silver spoon in his mouth, appealing to working class whites, who working class whites, by the way, embraced as one of their own simply because of the way he speaks, which is really not the way he's supposed to speak, given the amount of resources that have been offered to him. This is a guy who supposedly went to West Point, supposedly comes from money, but yet when you hear what he has to say, as Royce alluded to earlier, you're like, and your brother's like, yo, he talks like a child. He repeats himself constantly. He rambles on. He's not even, intelligent words don't come out of his mouth. Even this morning, it was like it's not up to the dignity of the office. And here you have Joe Biden, who gave one of the best speeches of his political career. Working class guy, Irish. I mean, the real deal.
I would tell you, Ed, that God or the spiritual other sets the timing for everything, because we know Joe Biden sometimes cannot go off script. We know sometimes Joe Biden can fumble and bumble and misremember and get dates wrong. He's supposed to say 5 million deficit, and he'll say something like a $5 deficit, and you're like, yo, Joe, $5? Like, what you talking about? Like, we're talking about the national budget. We deficit of $5. So, but
that's what I mean.
What I'm saying, Ed, is that it had to be, to me, when I looked at the transition of Obama coming in, because that was real hope. That was like an intellectual hope. That was the highest hope. Like, he checked off all the boxes. It was just like you were made for this position. You were made for this.
But that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about he seemed to really believe authentically what he was saying, and it allowed him to speak in a coherent and smooth manner. The last time I saw him talking like that was an old video of him talking about the situation in South Africa when he was a young senator. He was talking and he was like, bop, 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 hitting all the points. And I think when he's not trying to stick to some script that really isn't his, is when you have kind of the missteps.
Exactly. So you put him, the man upstairs or the woman upstairs, the spiritual being upstairs, put him in a position that allowed him to, it's almost as if you went to law school and you knew that you wanted to be a criminal defense attorney, and you were lucky enough to get a job at, even though it wasn't paying enough, at legal aid or public defender. Imagine if you were studying in law and you wanted to be a criminal defense attorney, and the only offer you got was in trademarks in a corporate company. The fit wouldn't be there, right? The fit wouldn't be there. But all the elements gave Joe the fit of coming together, the fit of all the years that he spent in what I call on the bench, right? Talking to the trainer, talking to LeBron when he's the 12th, when you're actually the 12th man, always being brought back to the team, even though you can't play a lick, you always brought back. But over a period of time, no, over a period, you know somebody like that, over a period of time, you get you develop a skill base, and people like you, and they're like, he's a good character guy. You got to have him around. And then one day you look up, this good character guy is the president or the GM of the basketball team. He is the one. And you forgot all the times that he couldn't play, and he was the 12th man, because now he is the man. And here, when you need prayer, you need a holding of the hand, something that he don't need any script. He could throw all that away. He could just spoke from his heart, right? And he would have been on point. Exactly what you're saying, Ed. But if this was a time and place where you started throwing economic stimulus and things like that, I know you wearing pearls. But if I heard words from him, Joe, what we'd be clutching.
Anyway,
it just don't compute. 2 and 2 is 5.
Well, he's smart enough to know to surround himself.
He's going to do that.
And
that's why we have VP Harris right there, right?
Exactly.
And that's why the cabinet is right there, and that's what is going to happen. But Dr. Grant, we can go on forever and forever.
But I just
today,
we do have some other business at hand that we need to talk about, but I just needed, it's the Chuck and the Pearls today for everyone who's representing and celebrating this historic moment. I think about my nieces, my goddaughters, everyone who has a daughter, what this means for them to actually see that all of the cracks at that ceiling, it finally broke. And I will say, even the commentators were talking about the Honorable Hillary Rodham Clinton, that she came, even when she lost, she had enough dignity to show up at the inauguration. And we didn't see that reciprocated for Biden Harris today, but it's all right. We still have made the mark that we need, and they have a lot of work ahead of us. So let's be very clear. As we get into the conversation today, he's inheriting quite a mess. We have Americans that have lost their lives. And I do want to make this last point. It spoke volumes of who he is to actually have a ceremony honoring the lives of all of those we've lost to COVID. I think that was very telling of the kind of compassion that he will have and will need in order to help us survive this particular time and space in history. So I know I appreciated it. So many of others that I've spoken to, just to have acknowledgement coming out of leadership about what we're all experiencing and the trauma that everyone has been through. And the rest we will take and watch and hold him accountable and the administration for everything that we need to do. But there's some other things that are happening now.
I think, Grant, before you go on, let me just say something. And there's a little levity to this, but let me really speak to this, because you're about to show something, but I think we want to talk about the guys being trespassing, right? But I will say this. Joe Biden's going to have a little inside hurdle to overcome. And I made the analogy, and it might have been funny, about the last guy on the bench, and he's always a good guy and he's always around. And the next thing you know, he becomes the president. But for the fact that some of the new senators and congressmen are young, he's going to levy out pretty well. But some of the older guys that know him as Joe from way back when, he's going to immediately have to come in and check them. Like immediately, I'm not that Joe that you pat on the head 18 years ago. I'm not the fumbling, bumbling Joe that was around 20 years ago. This is Joe 2.5, 2.0. And so let's get this together here. And don't fool yourself. It's a lot of that, right? Because I was envisioning while Clinton, Obama, and Bush was waiting for him to come to the place that they were at, I think the cemetery or some speaking grounds. Mm-hmm. I know they were saying among themselves, like, Joe, come on, man, hurry up, man. Like, what are you doing, man? Say your 2 sentences and get over here. We over here, bro. We did this. And it's all right. We did this. Just hurry up. So I hope he meets those challenges. And,
stop talking about double 46. He gonna be all right. And we're gonna help him heal this land and do the work that needs to be done, because we have people that need to be held accountable, like the story that didn't quite break in traditional news. But, once again, when we control the narrative, when we own the publications, we can tell the story. So Black Enterprise was able to share this whole story about the John Lewis tribute being destroyed by the pro-Trump mob that stormed the Capitol building. And there apparently were some other exhibits that were damaged there. Did you all hear about this?
Yes, definitely.
Oh yeah. I mean, I heard this morning about, this widespread defacement, destruction, damaging of specifically Black or historic or exhibits, portraits, busts, all types of items that are dedicated to people of color in the Capitol being, as I said, damaged, defaced, and or completely destroyed. From what I understand, Shirley Chisholm's portrait was defaced and damaged. And this goes towards the white supremacist aspect and the terrorist aspect of what occurred on the Capitol on Jan 6. This is what people who have no moral scruples do. And that's what happened at the Capitol recently.
But they do more than that, Ed. They do more than that. People that have
I'm going to join you guys. Just continue without me.
People who don't have morals and scruples, what they do is that they put themselves on Facebook. They put themselves on social media, committing the crimes that they think that they'll never be caught. Now, this has no racial boundaries, because as a defense counsel, I represent a lot of folks of color that have done the same stupidness, flashing the money, flashing the gun, showing the watch, all on their Facebook page, all open to the public. And so this is a humanistic flaw of just people that are stupid. And so they're idiotic. They have poor training. And so this is what you saw. So every time law enforcement, FBI, U.S. attorney makes an arrest, they're making an arrest for two reasons, which the first reason goes to the stupidity and the idiotic state that we see, is that you're taking the selfies of your wrongdoings. And where you think that's not going to get shown, no one's going to see that. That's one. Second, which I'm more proud of, which shows that politics will divide a family. Now, it used to be bringing a black man home or a white woman home, that'll divide a family. But politics will divide a family. And race is like 1B. Politics is 1A. So there were people, and there still are people in some of the defendants' own family that say, oh, look, that was Ed. We're going to turn him in. That was Fred. We're going to turn him in. That was Royce. We're going to turn him in. That was Stacy. We're going to turn her in. So family is saying, nah, we're not going for it. And it's not about the name, and it's not about legacy, because there was, cousins and things of that nature. And so that's how law enforcement is getting down to doing their due diligence. But yes, the place was trash. And we can assume it doesn't take, anybody of any high IQ to know that if you got white supremacists, folks in the White House, and they have their feet on the desk of Pelosi, right? Mm-hmm. And they're doing things to their own kind. You can imagine any portrait of Martin Luther King, Shirley Chisholm, you name it is getting destroyed or defaced. I don't care if you a Trump supporter or not. If you African American and your face is up somewhere and they have the wherewithal to destroy it, it's getting destroyed. Now, the
point I want to make here, though, is one that I want to connect with the audience to and others. Okay, yesterday was Monday was MLK Day. Monday was MLK Day, and during that day, I watched Selma. One of the things that we have to pay attention to is that we have to eliminate this scourge of white supremacy. Sometimes we look at it and we look at the defacement of a portrait or an exhibit, and it doesn't necessarily speak to the level of violence these people are capable of. And what I'm talking about is those 4 girls who died in that bombing of that church in Birmingham, Alabama. This is who these people are. I call them terrorists because I think, and I hearken back to what terrorists overseas have done in certain places when they've gone about the task of destroying ancient relics in the name of whatever belief or religion they believe in. Ancient relics that have been around for thousands of years, and all of a sudden somebody thinks that their belief is superior to anything else at the time and decides to destroy these things. These monuments, these portraits, these relics, and the defacement and destruction of them in the Temple of Democracy, which is what the Capitol is called, speaks to a larger ill that needs to be eradicated. It can't be tolerated. It can't be played with. It can't be placated. What these people are doing right here is the beginning of something larger that they have in mind. And it has to be, this has to be taken seriously. For this not to have made the news, and I'm talking about all of the news, is very worrisome to me.
No. Ed, I think I think what you're saying is true, but I also know that you know that I know that there's always a reason why. And we're going to keep the critical thinking cap on because we know why that information wasn't brought out in the first place. It wasn't a secret. As soon as reporters got in there, they could see what's going on. You know, this is what, in Dr. Grant, you alluded to this before, the suppression of information, suppression of what the deciding of what narrative is going to be exposed unanimously, right? Because no major station talked about it. No CNN, no CNBC, no ABC, no NBC. You're telling me none of these affiliates had no information, no newspaper, no magazine had no information that Shirley Chisholm and other people of color's replicas, statues, paintings were destroyed, or was it a unified decision that we're not going to discuss that? Now, it might have been a unified decision because we don't want to add more to the separation and hate that's going on, or a unified decision that we're just not going to talk about. We'll let that come out after Biden is in place and everything. So if you're really about being transparent and you're really about telling the truth and you're really about revealing the soul of what and who America is, then that needs to come out. And I want to also be careful in having and in making a distinction that, because I can see people jumping on, well, how is that different than African Americans asking for the Confederate flag or taking down statues in different parks of people that we believe as a nation were wrongdoers? That's different than going into the White House and destroying statues of people that have lifted up democracy, that has, have broken the glass ceiling. And for those things, I think we both agree there should be punishment. And I believe that 18 USC 1752 is going to be the route for which some of these folks are punished. And for those that are first-time listeners and didn't catch the show last week, we talked about various statutes for which the terrorists, the rioters will be facing. One of the statutes is 18 USC 1752, which talks about restrictions on buildings and grounds. Some of this statute speaks to this conduct as being in the land of what we call a misdemeanor. In New York City and in New Jersey, a misdemeanor means punishable up to a year, small violation, small criminal act. But some of the statutes, some of the reading of the elements within the statutes and some of the charges that people could be facing are heavy. And you can be looking at up to 10 years in jail. And we talked about how defense counsels were going on the air and trying to set up the mitigation for why their client should not be vilified or not receive any jail time. That would have been the appropriate time to talk about the defacing of African-American statues and busts and paintings in the White House. But the media held on that, didn't bring it up then. Because I think at the end of the day, unless the march is now about pushing and making sure that these folks are punished in the right way, you can see a lot of people walking away with some type of community service and walking away with no real penalty, no punishment, no go to jail for 6 months, no go to jail for a year. None of that happening. Just you have to do something other, some jail alternative. And with all the bail reform and justice reform, there's a hard argument to say that why shouldn't these first offenders receive that type of treatment?
Well, I'm hoping that some of these federal prosecutors also start looking at 18 USC 2384, which is seditious conspiracy, which carries a 20-year max. There are a number of these individuals that certainly, by the things that they've said online, the things that they said on camera while they were in the Capitol, voicing their intent to basically do an overthrow and conspiring with others to do that. So, I'm looking to see, at least some of these individuals charged with that as well, because there were, the evidence that's coming out these days over the last couple of days and onward, there are these individuals who've been caught on that site Parler that's been shut down, on Twitter, on just several other mediums, certainly conspiring with others, and certainly the intent was, a basic overthrow or interference with what was going on, and conspiring with others, and I've been learning over these coming days of right-wing militias that I had never heard of before until now.
Of course, yeah. Well, look. Thank God for Trump, because now the exposure is there, and now it's back on your plate in appetite, and now is no longer. And now the argument can be made that when you talk about racist police, when you talk about people not being suitable, the argument could be made, just like there's sympathizers that acted on Trump's behalf. There are sympathizers and racists in every form and fashion. This is not a foreign concept. Because you put on a uniform doesn't mean that you always for good, because some of those officers need to be charged and heavily dealt with. And when you talk about conspiracy, you letting people in and out, that's conspiring. That's an act. You letting them do certain things. And for those that cause damage to the law enforcement or injury to the law enforcement officers that was trying to protect and serve, that's where you get those statutes from and say, hey, look, you basically assaulted a federal officer. You assaulted a police officer.
You saw that brother, the brother that got the award today at the inauguration. Exactly. They were chasing after him.
And he was running very fast too.
But he was also running. He was also running to move them away from where they could have done real damage. So he was using the tact and skill that he was trained with. And I'm glad that he was recognized for putting himself at risk to protect those he was there to protect and serve. So interesting.
He was also and he was also steering them towards an area where he was going to get backup too, because later then other officers came to assist them. Just amazing. And I don't know if you guys heard about the 2 National Guardsmen who were found to have right-wing ties and were removed from the detail headed to DC.
So when you start to talk about reform and you start to talk about having psychological and psychiatric evaluation for those that are on law enforcement, hopefully this will be, as Dr. Grant says, we could put a pin on something like this and make it the rallying point as to why these things are necessary. You may not start out a certain way, but you may get to the finish line totally different. And for every year that you serve in that capacity, you may be going more towards that finish line, which is for bad rather than for good. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about reform. And, when I look at closely 18 USC 1752, and I'll just read the one section I think that's important in reference to facing the 10 years, the punishment for a violation of subsection A, and this is subsection B, but A, it says 1, a fine under this title, which I think most people will get a fine, or imprisonment for not more than 10 years, or both, if the person during and in relation to the offense uses, carries a deadly or dangerous weapon or firearm. We saw that. That's clear. We got that, right? Or B, the offense results in significant bodily injury as defined by another section. We saw that. Officers armed. People saying, yeah, let's tase him. Right? So
you saw them hitting one officer repeatedly with a flagpole.
That's right. So there's no doubt that those statutes are in play and can be effectuated.
Well, let's not let it get lost. The fact that they were using an American flag, the same people who had a problem with Brother Kaepernick kneeling to bring attention to all of what we see bubbling up to a head. How ironic is that?
It's not
Absolutely.
very ironic. It is so sad. So I mean, so those are the things that I think that we should keep our eyes on, and we ask the audience to keep our eyes on, our listeners to keep our eyes on. And so I think if I'm right, we have circled that wagon, and we'll circle it again as time gets closer and closer to the prosecution of these folks, because I expect, Ed, you and I, one of us will be getting a call to go back to CNN, to go back to Fox, to do this all over again. You know, I had separated myself from that life, but I'll go there just for this. You know what I mean? As long as they don't ask me to shave, and they don't ask me to shave, I'm good. We'll go, we'll do the dance, or they ask me to take a position that I don't want to take, which they have done before, then I go back on the blacklist. But you know, it is what it is. So,
well, we need to watch and see, because we know, had this been a different population storming the Capitol, all these arrests, everything, they would have been behind bars so fast, no one would be going to get them, right? They would have been arrested on the spot. Lives would have been lost on the spot. So the fact that now they have to do this grand search and use social media and have people identify who they saw in videos and photos is just, it's incredible. But the good news is that with this new 46th president and vice president being inaugurated today, there's a new sense of hope. We're not blind to the fact that we do have a great portion of the country who supported the lie that they were being fed and feel strongly about their views on what they thought happened. I thought it was ironic how some people, I love when the pundits do this and they go back and play clips, right? Because, you know, run the tape back. What you said to advance the lie, and then now all of a sudden you want to switch and think that there's no accountability to what happened. It wasn't just Trump that rallied the cry. There were other people sitting in those chambers who helped to participate in what we saw happen. So it'll be really interesting to see how all of our branches of government come together for really moving us forward past this insurrection.
Well, you know, and it's really going to be up to the Democrats to toe the line and say, nah, bruh, I saw what you did on Thursday. You can't come back here now and want to sit next to me on Friday and say, yo, you know what? That was Thursday. I was trying to get a deal done Thursday. That's why I acted that way. It's at that level where I would be very disappointed if the Democrats is not, no, you showed your colors. You're going to sit there. We're going to get what we need to get past despite you, because you don't have enough voices to lift you up. It's almost like the dude that has his gang with him. He's like, yo, let's get busy. Let's get busy. He turns around, his gang is not with him. And now you ain't got no more smoke, yo. Like, where did it go? And so I think that's what we're going to see. And hopefully the Democrats are strong enough to say, yo, you guys are going to be ostracized. There has to be.
Well,
look, I understand you got to shake certain hands to get a deal done. And there's certain hands that you just like, yo, man, I'm not shaking your hand, and this deal's still going to get done. And that's the problem I have when you start putting labels on Democrat versus Republican, because they're like, I'm not shaking your hand to Republicans, and they get the deal done. And we ain't even 24 hours in. Oh, well, we got to capitulate and kind of, yeah, we could do that, and you still get ostracized.
Well, what I wanted to mention was I read an article about a congresswoman, I believe, out of Colorado, who's being outed by two Democrats who say they saw her the day before giving a tour to a group of people before the riot, and she's trying to claim, oh, those were family members of mine, you know, and so, you know, I'm sure that the review of the tapes are starting to look closely as to how all these people got there, and why are you bringing people anyway to the Capitol during COVID?
And you know, Ed, that is such low-hanging fruit for an investigator or a prosecutor. And I'm so glad. And she's so inexperienced that she just said the first thing out of her mouth, because then now you just go, you say, can I have the names and numbers of those folks? You get those folks in that box. You get them in the box. We've been in the box before. I know I've been in the box before. You sit them down and you say, hey, look, before you become a target, right now, you just a witness. Before you become a target of this investigation, before we charge you, right now, we just talking to you. As a matter of fact, sign this paper just to show that it's called a proffer agreement for everybody out there. It's a proffer agreement. You proffer to give up information, and the government will think about, quote unquote, think about how valid that information is. and whether or not they're going to prosecute you despite that information. So you better come correct. And if you lie, we can charge you with obstruction of justice or perjury unto itself, which has a 1-year sentence on it. So now you're in the ghillie trap now. So those family members are going to say, I wasn't there. And then when they look at the tapes and they do the visual, the identity visuals, they're like, well, that's not you. So that's what I'm hoping still takes place, Ed, that person stays ostracized and nobody decides to compromise her because, oh, we need that vote from Colorado. And, we're about healing. And Jesus said, turn the other cheek. No, the person that wrote the Bible forgot the other sentence. That's after he punched the dude in the face, he turned the other. No, because Jesus was human and had flaws too. It's all telling the story.
Yeah, we're not going to have Mr. Russell do theology on Speaking Legally. But anyway, to your point, we hope that truth comes out along with other truths, because she's not the only one that apparently they're finding out there was some real interesting things happening the night before. Because how would they know? Every time I've gone to the Capitol, I get lost. So how would they know where to go or where to attempt to go if somebody had not given them information and intel? That's not just random. And I think what the New Yorker showed, that broke a couple of days ago as well, with the actual footage of what they were saying, where they were going. It'll come out. The truth always comes out, as they say. It will come out. And we just hope that now that it's coming out and they're making arrests, it's not just for the optics of it, but these people actually have to pay the price for what they did to our Capitol.
So I think we should make sure that we keep our eye on, because I know we want to talk about pardons. I think we should make sure we keep our eye on exactly what you said. The truth will come out. What we need to keep our eye on is when it comes out. And what we need to keep our eye on is what are the statutes of limitations to charging any of these people with the crimes that they're being charged with when the truth comes out, right? The truth come out the day after you can't be charged with it anymore. What could the truth come out? The Essence magazine and everything else comes out after we got a new president. What are you saying? I mean, come on. It's not whether the truth comes out, it's when. How long can it be suppressed? Does it no longer have effect? So I say all that to say this, as you said, Dr. Grant, and I've often say, while we're sleeping, they're thinking. And last night, Trump was thinking all night, because pardons were flying left and right up to 1 a.m. in the morning. And, before we go into just kind of describing, who got what and when, I just want to briefly just familiarize our listeners to some terms, right? And Ed and you and I, we had a discussion, and it gets a little bit confusing in looking at all the different labels. A lot of people think pardon equals exoneration and that there's no conviction and it doesn't exist. That is a yes and no. A full pardon, an absolute pardon, that happens. But every pardon is not a full pardon, not an absolute pardon. Some pardons are described as a pardon, but it's really a commutation of sentence where your sentence is reduced. Whether you're serving time and you're released, or whether you're about to serve time and then you don't have to do it anymore. Or if you serve time and you have what they call post-release, which is like probation, you have to check in. And now the president comes in and says that you don't have to do that. And Ed, you're the one that hit me to, hey, Royce, there's not only a pardon on the federal level, you even have an executive pardon where you're talking about the governor can do certain things. So I'm going to throw out a couple of pardons here just so you could be familiar, I really want you to look it up later on. We're not going to define all of them, but I'm just going to read some names because you might hear this again. One is, like I said, the absolute pardon. Conviction goes away, exonerated. The unconditional pardon. Conviction doesn't go away, but any conditions you have, there's no other, like you got to commit, you got to do community service or things of that nature. A conditional pardon means that there's some condition that you must fulfill. A charter pardon deals with organizations. What is an absolute pardon, which sometimes is called a full pardon, which is sometimes called a total pardon,
is, once again, everything goes away. A general pardon is where a class or group of people, political prisoners, are pardoned. A partial pardon, you may need to still pay a penalty. You may need to still do something. And as I said, we talked about executive agreements and executive pardons. Now, Ed, I think you wanted to expound on commutation and some other terminology that we might hear of.
Well, yeah, if I may, when it comes to the presidential pardons, it comes from the U.S. Constitution's Article 2, Section 2, which talks about the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons, except in cases of impeachment. And so, you got pardons, you got unconditional pardons, like the one that was granted to former President Nixon by Gerald Ford. You got commutations, which are changing of punishment, like, say, from a death sentence to a life sentence. You got clemency, which is a reduction in penalty. You got reprieve, which I just mentioned, which is generally a temporary postponement of a punishment, which usually is done to allow for an appeal by an individual. So you got a lot of different ones. And like, for instance, you mentioned the governor. The governor of the state of New York granted clemency to 21 persons on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2020. One of them, I believe I read, was a young woman who had been spending years in prison for selling marijuana, so, you have the granting of clemency, which is an executive power that the governor has. With respect to Trump, the report is that right before he left office at noon today, it was 73 pardons and 70 commutations. So, and one of the interesting...
So he got real busy before he left. Like I said, once again, he was that tenant. See, the night before, and here's the example. The night before, you and I was having a conversation, and we're going to talk about this. We were a little like, what's going to happen to Lil Wayne? Like, this is very disrespectful, right? There's color involved and culture involved in anything and everything. And then at the last hour, we'll talk a little bit more directly, but the last hour, Lil Wayne gets pot free. And so I think most of our watchers and listeners of the news, they know names like Roger Stone, who sentence was commuted, right? They have Paul Manafort, who received a pardon, and all his conditions and everything post-release, you name it, was wiped off the board. He was released after his 2 years. He don't have to worry about anything. And I'm looking at my little cheat sheet here. You have Charles Kushner, who is Ivana Trump's father-in-law. Ivana Trump is the daughter of Donald Trump. 2 years, that's it, all done and said. And then you have what we call the New York politics. And Stacey, I see you have the executive grant of clemency in reference to Roger Stone. But before you show that, can you do a quick close-up? So now, some of you thought that this was a Trump hat. And if you didn't, this is what it says. It says sold, not for sale. But that's what happened in these pardons. People,
they appear to be very transactional.
That's right, exactly. They sold their soul to represent Trump in some capacity, and this is their reward. And it's very businesslike and very transactional, as you said. And I'm sorry to cut you off.
And I think the most interesting piece for me, and certainly for others, was that I don't know if the audience recalls a gentleman by the name of Sheldon Silver. He was the leader of the assembly for 21 years. He was one of what they refer to as the three men, no longer just men, because you got Andrea Stewart Cousins, Senator Stewart Cousins, but one of the three important people in the room when it comes to the New York State budget. And this individual reigned like a king in the assembly for 21 years, and he got convicted of fraud. And there was reports of him being considered for a pardon by Trump, because right now he's serving 6.5 at Otisville. And he got passed over, and people are a little astonished by that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I said he has a fine. He has to pay over $1 million.
Oh yeah, but I think that's an individual who has more than enough money, or his friends do, to pay that fine. His big deal was staying out of jail because he spent buku money on legal fees. He stretched his case for years. I mean, I'm talking about from trial to appeals to retrial. So that fine is small compared to him doing that time, that 6.5 at Otisville. That was something he was trying to avoid, and people thought that he was going to get pardoned. But the reports are that the New York GOP delegation was like, "No way, don't do it," and it didn't get done. So, interesting unfolding of events here. Certainly.
Well, what's interesting about that is that the nexus to Trump is very frail and thin, right? You don't hear anything about him doing something for Trump. You don't hear him having served or given money to Trump. And that's why I put sold, not for sale, because the ones that we know that got either a pardon, full, partially, total, absolute, commutation of sentence, any of those things were people that we know that there's a business transaction. We can see it. We know it. It's very visual. And, I'm glad that Trump didn't spare any racial lines in doing it, because, there's always a ray of sunshine in a cloudy day. However, the transactions are still what they are, and it's still business-like. And, as much as I love Lil Wayne's music, when you're walking around with a gold-plated gun in the airport and you get smacked for it and you're facing 10 years straight up, and all of a sudden the date of sentencing is coming up January 28th, and now you got pardoned, that means you sold your soul. You're a thinking man, so I commend you. But you
listen, man, I don't got nothing in my heart for these people. Like you said, they sold out. They were willing to back this racist supremacist agenda.
But we have to understand what he sold out on, and I want you to continue. So our audience understand what he did is that, first of all, he's going to take that selfie with Trump. He did the old Steve Harvey. I got to take that selfie, right? So, damn, if a selfie going to get you a pardon, you know what I'm saying? I might want to put one of those in my back pocket, right? And then what he did is that he stood up for Trump's economic plan for Black folks and his justice reform plan. And now you can continue. I just want to make sure that our listeners and our watchers and viewers know what he sold on.
Well, listen, my thing is I'm a fan of hip hop. And one of the worst things that I don't like about the art form that I love so much is it's full of individuals that just don't seem to have any principles. They're willing to rap about anything. They're willing to do anything at all costs. They're highly materialistic. Those are some of the worst features of hip hop, and it's manifested itself in this pardon in terms of, that's my man. Please give me a pardon. Like, come on, really? That's how we doing it here. We're not standing for anything.
No, but wait. But what we say? What's that record? That's the new flavor of the year, right? What was that old
Craig
Mack?
Mack?
Right? Yeah, Craig Mack. You know what I'm saying? That's
Craig Mack,
right? Craig Mack, right? The new flavor of the year, and that's what we see. We see that.
How about you don't have a flavor? How about your flavor is?
Once again. Wait. Once you in that box, ask Kodak Black, who had robbery charges, sexual offense charges. And the ironic thing about Kodak Black, whose sentence was commutated, right? Because he was in jail, and I think.
How about freeing Mumia? Let's free Mumia.
That's not going to happen.
Leonard Peltier.
That's not going to happen. So, in dealing with the pardon and dealing with, in reference to Kodak Black, we realize that what you need to do is support Trump in some way, and then it happens. And so when he supports Trump, once again, in any type of criminal reform, then his sentence gets chopped down, right? Same thing with Kwame Kilpatrick. That's off the hip hop stand. That's more like a Levert lookalike, right? It's still in the music genre, but you know, Levert look like.
Okay.
Once again,
All right.
he once again, all he did was write Trump a letter. He wrote Trump a letter. How he shook. You know what? As a matter of fact, we got 2 seconds. I need to just read this because I think this is important because this is how narcissist this man was, and this how little it took to sell your soul. What Kwame Kilpatrick did was that he said, he wrote a letter to Trump. It says, "You have shaken up the entire world, and that is a great thing to behold." Kilpatrick further wrote in the letter, according to the Deadline Detroit, so it's not according to me, "I applaud your boldness and your tenacity in confronting the traditional and sometimes deformed politics of this country." That will not only get you pardoned or have your sentence commutated, you are going to commute it. You're going to get some cookies, some roses. You're going to get press. You're going to get a job because you know the man.
Can I say something?
You know, he wants to run for re-election. So who he's going to have by his side?
Can I say something?
Yes, please do before we wrap up because we're touching on other subjects for a whole nother show. But yes, go ahead, Senor Pinchado. Dígame.
The last time there was this level of violence in the Capitol was for a cause that some people consider worthy, and that's Puerto Rican independence. Lolita Lebron and Miranda Cancel, I believe, and a few other activists went into the Capitol, into the chamber, and declared Puerto Rican independence and started, shooting in the air. In Lebron's case, in the case of Cancel, he actually shot a congressman. And, I'm not saying this was right. I don't advocate violence, in terms of any causes. But with that being said, these individuals were prosecuted. They spent 20 years in prison. And a guy by the name of Jimmy Carter, President Jimmy Carter, granted them clemency. He granted them clemency after they had served 20 years because I believe their sentences were beyond that. And they, were eventually welcomed back into their communities. Whenever I think of these pardons and I think of clemency, I think of people who have done things to have been worthy of such things. These individuals, Lil Wayne, Kwame Kilpatrick, they are a disgrace to the power of pardon and clemency. Point blank. That's all I have to say.
Everybody on his list is a disgrace. But, the reason why I bring them up, not necessarily to highlight them in such a negative way, but this is where the cultural meets the legal. And how can we leave them? How can we leave them out? We be doing ourselves a disjustice, an injustice, a disservice. We cannot be truth tellers if we don't grab what's in the air. And the reason why I wore this hat, sold not for sale, is that is exactly what we saw. And we saw it on a level, in a non-violent level, and we saw it in a violent level. Because why are you commuting or pardoning people that may be causing violence in another community? I don't get that, bro.
That is a whole nother story. As we know, this is a right that every president gets. This particular one, it's really, it makes you pause when you look at the list and what individuals did. But as we move forward, as this president has a huge task of bringing the country together, of helping people to understand what's really important right now in regards to the life of our country. Like literally, we are close to 500,000 Americans no longer being here with us because of this virus. I don't know how his plan is going to roll out in 100 days, but he's putting people in place to help us be able to survive, to see another inauguration with the financial challenges that we have. And he called out today, white supremacy and racial unrest, that it's something that he's committed to addressing. So as we see the tide shifting, I believe our Vice President Harris just did some of her first official duties while we were on air. swearing in the new members within the body and really looking at how she is now sitting in this position of power, how President Biden is going to govern with empathy, as I think everyone can agree, those who voted for him and those who didn't vote for him. We just all have to stay prayerful that we see the change and we push for our elected officials to do the things that they were elected to do in these offices. So I want to just thank everyone for showing up today, for Stacy, Jason, Richard, Monica, Deborah, so many of you. If I don't catch everyone, thank you all for showing up and being a part of the show as we literally are witnessing what I'm calling herstory today and seeing the inauguration of the 46th president of these United States and our first ever female African-American, South Asian, Caribbean, Howard University, HBCU grad. It is a lot of pride that people are feeling and hopeful again that we're moving in a direction that can make the world still see us as a leader. So whatever your affiliations and considerations are, we're here on Speaking Legally to talk about where the legal meets the cultural. Our legal experts, Edward Pichardo Esquire and Royce Russell Esquire, have once again broken down the law for us so you understand what is actually happened for those who did get pardons, clemencies, commutations, the difference between that, and then looking at the road ahead as we watch what really happens with everyone that the Department of Justice has arrested. So, we break it here first on Speaking Legally. But to my co-host, any final words before we jump off today's show and prepare for the rest of this year?
Get it. I'll let you say your piece.
Libertad or muerte. Freedom or death.
And so I'll say something along those lines. Proof is in the pudding. Everybody got titles. We've seen the narrative. We've seen the story before. Democrats get in power and the pendulum only gets pushed, but so far. I like it. I love all the titles. I love what we're going to do. But sometimes, like they did in the park, the big boys got to take the court and the ball got to be thrown over the fence. And this is what they need to do. Take over the park, throw the ball over the fence, and let's get the job done. Because 6 months from now, I don't want to hear how so-and-so is tying up that we can't get the Immigration Dream Act passed. I don't want to hear that, oh no, we having logistical problems with the vaccine. I don't want to hear what we hear all the time. Different places, same statement. Proof is in the pudding.
All right. See you next week. Same time, same place. Speaking Legally, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for tuning in.